It's time we address this situation because this has been going under the radar for a lot of people for a long while, to the point where we're still seeing conversations about this in 2024. But no, Nintendo is not censoring Japanese games for being too lewd or for being sexualized. You can look on the eShop right now and see plenty of games that have sexual themes and ideas, right? As of late, however, there have been a lot of claims from nobody devs, like the sort of etchy, no-name, low-effort developers from Japan who have been coming out and making these wild claims saying Nintendo of America is censoring us. They're preventing us from releasing on the eShop. And yet, their behavior makes no sense in this regard. Why would they censor or remove your games while leaving all the stuff that's already up there up and available for purchase? The cope is right now this idea that there's been radical changes at Nintendo of America. They've had policy changes and now they're cracking down on new releases. But that doesn't seem to be the case at all, because other games are coming out completely fine. And you're seeing copes in regards to that as well. It's not a formal policy. It's a rogue agent at Nintendo of America who's doing this. But if that was true, all these developers would have to do was resubmit or appeal to get their game on the console. And this is what it boils down to. What's actually happening is that the developers, and it's not just one person doing this, the developers who are claiming that Nintendo is censoring their content have no desire to release on Nintendo consoles. What they want is to succeed on PlayStation and PC. And by claiming that Nintendo is preventing them from making an official release on Nintendo Switch, because of sexual themes, that guarantees support and attention from the community. Every single time we see this happens, Nintendo's falling off, they're going off the deep end, they're becoming woke, this has been going on for years. This is not a new thing, right? People have been saying they've been doing this since the Wii U days. And then they put out Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which is more lewd than any of these games that were supposedly censored, right? Again, the reality does not match up with the narrative. And it never really has. This is not a new thing. The idea that Nintendo is actively going out stopping developers from putting mature content on their consoles was always delusional, right? Back in the day, it was Mortal Kombat and Doom and stuff like that. But in reality, they did quite a lot to support titles like Conquer and Perfect Dark and GoldenEye and stuff like that. They were very heavily involved in those projects, right? It's not like Nintendo hates adult gamers or adult content, right? They don't want it interfering with their own brand, right? Their own kind of general audience's style brand, right? So yeah, they have to put a certain barrier of entry to that kind of stuff. They don't want Conquer. They didn't want Conquer being promoted alongside more traditional cutesy platformers, for example. But there are real business reasons for that. It's not because they hated the game and they wanted to censor it. Conquer is a really good example, actually, where we went from the uncensored N64 version to the heavily censored downgraded version on Xbox, right? Microsoft had more of a problem with Conker's content than Nintendo did. And this is just one example, right? But when you actually look at these situations, when you constantly see YouTubers making these statements that Nintendo is censoring games now, let it be known that these were the same people crying foul when Tokyo Mirage Sessions came out. These were the same people crying foul when Xenoblade Chronicles X came out, when Fire Emblem Fates came out, right? If you're going to claim that Nintendo is falling off now, we have to acknowledge the fact that you were saying that several years ago as well. It's almost as if you don't buy the products, you don't consume the products, you don't engage with the products, and so you don't have a very good idea of what the product actually is. What you have is a narrative presented to you by corrupt third-party developers and gaming news outlets, right? You are taking Niche Gamer seriously when they release statements corroborating this idea that Nintendo is actively censoring certain lewd games on Switch, when that really couldn't. Not only is that not true, it directly goes against the reality of the situation, in that PlayStation is becoming more known for censoring Japanese games. So, like, what exactly is Nintendo specifically doing that's so much worse than PlayStation? Right? That's what I want to know. And you'll never see people acknowledge this, but Nintendo does significantly less than PlayStation does in that front. So when you compare the two, like, PlayStation censors more, and yet you will never ever see people make claims that PlayStation games are getting canceled in the West, or that they're not coming out here, or that, like, you won't see, like, actual movements to uncensor games or what have you. No, like, every single time it's Nintendo that's targeted. And I do think the timing of this, coupled with, like, the results of last night's Game Awards show, the gaming industry is desperately trying to rally to try and prevent people from being enthusiastic about the upcoming Nintendo hardware, right? They do not want the next Nintendo console to do as well as the Switch, and they will go to any extreme lengths they possibly can to make that happen. And I really don't think there's anything they can do. Right? The Game Awards were a disaster. No one's happy with them. No one's happy with the results. No one was happy with the nominees. Nobody liked the show itself, right? Like, more and more people are beginning to notice that, like, wow, it's more like the PlayStation Awards than anything. And of course, I've been saying this for years, but more and more people are beginning to catch on to, like, what's actually wrong with the gaming industry. What the problem actually is. It has nothing to do with woke culture or declining standards in academia, or, like, what, like, the core fundamental problem with gaming is this worship of the PlayStation brand, and this idea that Nintendo is somehow inferior to it. And this is just one example of how the narrative contradicts reality, right? There is no way that Nintendo is actively censoring games from third-party developers at this stage.